After slipping into my gown, I stood up, and the makeup artist couldn't help but gush, "Miss Langston, you're absolutely slaying in this dress." I gave her a quiet thanks and headed out, only to hear a ruckus downstairs. In the massive golden revolving doors was Ethan Blake, my fiancé of 3 years, casually walking in with a young, stunning woman by his side. What made it even more ridiculous was that her dress was a carbon copy of mine. Tonight was a lavish gala that hadn't graced downtown for ages. Everyone there was at the top tier, sharp and observant. Naturally, they could instantly tell that my dress was nothing but a high-end replica. For the first time in 21 years, I had gone all out. But in reality, I felt like a clown in fancy attire. "Ethan, who's this chick with you?" Someone couldn't hold back from asking. Ethan took the woman's hand and said, "This is my girl, Lily Carter. After tonight, she'll be my fiancé." "But what about Miss Langston?" Ethan gave me a frosty look and declared, "The engagement between me and the Langston family is off. These past 3 years, the Blake family has already done more than enough for the Langstons." He was spot on. If it hadn't been for the $1 million dowry the Blake family provided when we got engaged, my family would have been broke long ago. Could my parents and siblings keep living the high life? Absolutely not. Ethan knelt down, pulled out a diamond ring, and popped the question to Lily. She burst into tears and threw herself into his arms. He gently wiped her tears, comforted her, and kissed her. I watched Lily surrounded by ladies eager to win her favor, chatting animatedly. After tonight, she wouldn't just be another little star or a homewrecker. As for me, Clara Langston, in downtown, and the Langston family, it seemed I was left with nowhere to stand. "Can you move aside?" a voice called from behind. I turned to see two classy-looking girls holding trays of snacks, glaring at me impatiently. I stepped aside. "Her dress is so cheap." "Yeah, I wonder what cheap fabric this knockoff is made of. It must give you allergies if you touch it. She has the nerve to be here. So embarrassing." I walked expressionlessly to a corner in the lounge, pretending not to hear their nasty comments. My phone buzzed, and I answered it. My mom's angry and ashamed voice came through. "Clara, the Blake family wants to call off the wedding. The $50 million dowry needs to be returned. For 3 years, you couldn't keep a guy's heart. You were so useless. Figure out how to get back the $50 million yourself. The Langston family is flat broke." I stared at the dropped call, feeling suffocated. All the glitz and glam meant zilch to me. I just wanted to escape ASAP. I heard that Mr. Cole came back to downtown yesterday and would be at the gala tonight. That's unlikely. Mr. Cole rarely shows up to these things. True, the last time he was on the scene was on TV news. I pressed my slightly aching chest and opened my bag for some meds. The rustling startled the two chatting girls, and they gradually walked away. My heartache grew, and the tight dress nearly choked me. I didn't care about finding the meds. I wanted to unbutton the hidden clasp and breathe. But no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't budge. I tilted my head back, gasping for air, my long hair falling over the deck, lips turning pale. Not far off, the grand feast had kicked off. My ex-fiancé and his new girl were probably dancing sweetly together, and I maybe would quietly pass out on this silent deck. "Mr. Cole, you going in now?" "You go first, I'll join later," Simon Cole said as he moved toward the deck railing. "It's windy here, watch out." People around him tactfully exited one by one. Now that Simon was back in downtown, he was bound to make more moves. From now on, no one in downtown dared to stand against him. The gala organizers pulled all the strings to have him show up. Initially, he wasn't keen, but yesterday, his family pressured him about getting hitched. So he seized the chance to take some downtime. A gust of wind blew. Simon noticed a slim, frail figure not far away. He turned to leave but heard a muffled sound on the deck. Slowly, he turned back to check. The moonlight was dim, and that figure lying on the deck looked mysteriously alluring. My face was probably ghostly pale. The faint moonlight showed a face that had lost its charm, slightly distorted. I looked at the unfamiliar man in front of me like I'd grabbed a lifeline. I tightly grabbed his sleeve. The fight for survival gave me unexpected strength. I even pulled his arm and pressed it against my chest. My breathing sped up, heart racing irregularly. He glanced at me, seemingly understanding my distress. He unexpectedly knelt on one knee, his slender fingers gripping my wrist, and calmly asked, "Where's the zipper on your dress?" I couldn't speak and struggled to pull his hand away, pressing it against my chest. His eyebrows knitted, he released my hand and looked down at my dress's neckline. Then, his fingers fiddled with the hidden clasps. Suddenly, I felt light, the pressure on my chest easing. Air rushed in, and I breathed deeply, forgetting that my dress was tailored today with only petal-shaped invisible breast stickers on my chest. Now, the front of my dress was wide open, exposing me to him. It wasn't until a gentleman's suit, still warm from his body heat, landed heavily on me that I snapped out of my daze. I bit my lip, blushing before looking up and quietly saying, "Thank you so much. Can you stand up?" I nodded, gripping the suit jacket with one hand and the railing with the other, barely staying upright. "Need me to call your family or friends for you?" he offered. I shook my head quickly. "No, I just need to chill for a bit. I'll be fine." His phone rang a few times. I saw him step aside to take the call. "I've told you, I have plans for the marriage. Don't worry, I won't let my granddad go without closure." He seemed a bit irritated. The mist highlighted his cold, stern profile. Suddenly, I remembered where I'd seen this guy before, and at that moment, he turned his head, and our eyes locked. I quickly looked down. He finished his call and walked toward me, his perfume lingering in the air. I coughed awkwardly. Then he gestured to the suit on me. "You can hand the clothes to the attendant later." My face turned red again as I nodded and softly replied, "Okay." His gaze fell on my fingers. I was clutching his suit jacket tightly. The inner layer of my dress was spread open, with only a layer of silicone breast tape between my skin and the delicate suit lining. It was a hidden secret only I knew. Feeling uneasy, I instinctively crossed my arms. As he was about to leave, I mustered the courage to speak. "Just now, I overheard your call. Can we strike a deal?" I bravely looked up at him. "Maybe you need a wife, someone low-key, who can disappear anytime, and I need 50 million to buy my freedom." "A deal? What kind of deal are you pitching, Miss Langston?" I was so nervous I didn't even realize he knew my name. "Need a wife?" I gathered my courage and stared at him intensely. "I won't cause you any hassle and will do my best to cooperate. Of course, I won't bother you when you don't need me." He looked at me in the moonlight, his silver gray shirt and dark pants hugging his slim, straight figure. His brows and eyes weren't sharp, but his jawline was. I noticed the watch on his wrist, which could probably buy the luxe cruise ship I was on right now. "What are your conditions?" I hesitated, feeling a bit awkward as I spoke slowly. "I need 50 million. "What for?" I lowered my eyelashes, unable to meet his gaze. But in front of a stranger, it felt like I could openly share my distress and helplessness. "My fiancé wants to cancel the wedding, and I need to return half of the dowry to him." "I can't come up with 50 million. Cancel the wedding?" He suddenly looked at me, his gaze unexpectedly sharp. "Yes, cancel the wedding." I laughed lightly and lifted my face. The sea breeze tousled my long hair as I gazed into the night. "I have nowhere else to go, sir. I accept the deal, but I have a condition," he said. I couldn't believe it as I looked at him. "What condition?" "Get the marriage certificate within 3 days." "In such a rush?" I asked, surprised. "You heard my call just now. My granddad's health isn't good, and he's eager to see his granddaughter-in-law," he explained. After he finished, he raised an eyebrow and looked at me. "Is it inconvenient for you?" I quickly shook my head. "No, it's fine." Then it settled. The sea breeze picked up, and my long hair whipped into a mess, brushing my face. Suddenly, he took a step forward and brushed stray hair from my face, tucking it behind my ear. "I'll have someone pick you up the day after tomorrow." "But how do you know where I am?" I asked. He didn't answer. When he withdrew his hand, it felt like his fingertips lightly touched my face. Or maybe it was just my imagination. He left for a long time, and I was still trapped in that unreal dream. Until Ethan Blake, who was slightly drunk, suddenly approached and grabbed my wrist. "Clara, for 3 years I've been waiting for you to bow down and beg me," he said. "As long as you're willing to submit like those girls, I'll give you not just 1 billion, but 10 billion for the Langston family." Ethan was drunk. I shoved him away hard, but dealing with a drunk was tough. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes, then fixed his gaze on the suit I was wearing. Whose clothes are you rocking? It's none of your business. None of my business? His handsome face twisted slightly. Clara, I want to see who dares to mess with my girl. He forcefully grabbed my suit and ripped it open. I tried to hold it together, but it was useless. The sea breeze blew fiercely, and under the moonlight, everything shimmered white. Clara, Ethan murmured dazedly. But the next second, a sharp, female voice rang out. Clara Langston, you've got no shame. Oh my God, how can she seduce someone else's fiancé by undressing in public? Mr. Blake was stunned. Lily, check her out. I snapped back to reality, panicking and trying to cover my dress. But Lily had already rushed over, crying, and tried to slap me in the face. What are you doing? A deep male voice suddenly sounded calm. Lily's hand froze for a moment. Then she was pulled aside by Ethan. I quickly stepped back, raising my arms in panic to protect my chest. Everyone turned their heads upon hearing the voice, and someone exclaimed in surprise, It's Mr. Cole. Which Mr. Cole? Who else could it be? It's Simon Cole. I widened my eyes and saw Simon behind the crowd, the man who helped me unbutton my chest binder on the deck earlier. The guy I had the guts to ask to be my husband and give me $50 million turned out to be the famous Simon Cole of downtown. Simon glanced at me and then looked away. He turned to his female assistant and said something. The assistant immediately walked through the crowd to my side and helped me put my suit jacket back on. Miss Langston, let me take you downstairs to chill first. I nodded stiffly and thanked her. As she helped me leave, I couldn't help but glance back. The crowd had already quietly dispersed, everyone standing respectfully. Mr. Cole, this is a misunderstanding. Ethan was partially sober, cautiously trying to explain. What misunderstanding? Simon's voice remained calm, no hint of anger. I slowly stopped and stood in the corner. The assistant didn't rush me, waiting patiently. Ethan's voice trembled a bit. Lily is with me. She's my girlfriend. She misunderstood and lost control. Simon's eyes sharpened, showing displeasure. I don't think there's such an uncultured presence among downtown socialites. Ethan felt extremely embarrassed and Lily was on the verge of tears. Simon ordered his subordinate, escort this young lady off the ship. Lily cried and held onto Ethan's sleeve, refusing to let go. Having been in the entertainment biz for years, she knew how serious the situation was. Being kicked off the ship like this would soon spread all over downtown. She'd become a laughingstock with no way to redeem herself. Mr. Cole, Lily knows she was wrong. Please give her a chance. Simon glanced at him and said, Mr. Blake can leave with her. Ethan closed his mouth and withdrew his hand. Lily was quickly escorted off the ship by someone. The crowd on the deck also quietly dispersed. The farce ended like this. No one saw it coming. Mr. Cole, the female assistant's voice suddenly brought me back to reality. I turned around in surprise, and Simon was walking toward me. He waved his hand for the assistant to leave and gently asked, Clara, are you scared? I shook my head blankly. No, not at all. I'll take you back to rest first. Simon raised his hand and lightly held my wrist. Is that okay? Feeling dizzy, I nodded randomly and let him lead me forward. But just a few steps in, I felt a cool sensation on my chest. In that moment, my steps halted, and the nude-colored bra sticker slipped from under my suit. Simon turned around, his gaze catching the bra sticker. I felt so embarrassed I wanted to die, but he calmly bent down and picked up the piece of bra sticker. I felt mortified. He calmly bent down and picked up the piece of bra sticker. After folding it neatly, he pocketed it and reassured me gently. This one's dirty and can't be used anymore. I'll have someone bring you clean clothes later. My face burned red, and I could only respond with a small, okay. Let's go. Simon held my hand again. The corridor was short, and we quickly reached the lounge. He escorted me inside and then left for something else. I sat quietly for a while before finally calming down. But after calming down, I realized belatedly that Simon Cole initially called me Miss Langston, but just now he called me Clara. He knew my name. He knew who I am. The assistant brought new clothes for me just now. I took a shower and changed into fresh clothes. Then I neatly folded Simon's suit jacket and put it in a bag. I wanted to dry clean it before returning it to him. Mr. Cole instructed me to personally escort Miss Langston back if he wants to leave, the assistant said. She seemed to be in her 30s or 40s and was very capable. Please also tell Mr. Cole that I'll take the clothes back for dry cleaning first, I said casually. No need to bother yourself, Miss Langston. Leave it to me. I didn't push back and handed her the bag, casually asking, How did Mr. Cole know my name? The assistant just smiled and said, That's Mr. Cole's private matter. When I got off, I received a text from an unknown number. Clara, this is Simon Cole. Save my number. I stared at the message for a while before slightly pursing my lips and replying, Okay, it's saved. I'll pick you up the day after tomorrow. Rest well these 2 days. He didn't send any more texts. When I returned to the Langston family, it was already late at night, but no one was asleep. The lights were on, but the atmosphere was tense and heavy. When they saw me come in, my mom immediately stood up. Clara Langston, have you figured out what to do? What did you do? How did you piss off Ethan Blake and make him cancel the wedding? Yes, Mom, you know very well our family relies on the Blake family for business to survive. 50 million. Where are we getting that now? Your sister-in-law is about to have triplets. Aren't you sending us to the wall? Everyone was blaming me for not winning our Ethan Blake's heart and smoothly marrying into their family. Let them keep draining us financially. When they set up this marriage for me, a sickly daughter born with health issues, while they chose their healthy eldest daughter, did they ever ask if I was okay with it? When they used the $1 million dowry from the Blake family to plug their financial gaps and keep up their lavish lifestyle, did I ever enjoy a penny of it? Now that the Blake family wants to call off the wedding, they won't take a single penny of the 50 million, but they expect me to bear it all. Fine, I'm willing to bear it. But after that, I won't be part of the Langston family anymore. Clara, say something, Bessie Langston said, pushing me lightly in annoyance. I've found a way to get 50 million, I replied. Really? Do you have a solution? I saw the excitement in my mom's eyes. However, it might damage our Langston family's reputation, I warned. What do you mean? I smiled faintly. At tonight's gala, I met a wealthy businessman willing to pay 50 million to help me, but he has a wife and kids, so I have to become his mistress. I had no choice but to agree, I explained. But if I'm publicly involved with him, our relationship will be exposed, I continued. How can you do something so shameless? Our Langston family has always been respectable. If you become someone's mistress, you'll shame our family for generations. Well, then what do you suggest? Should we sell some of our assets to give 50 million to the Blakes? There was silence. No one responded. Finally, my dad, who had been silent all along, spoke up. We must give the 50 million to the Blake family, he declared. We can't tarnish the Langston family's reputation, he added. I laughed coldly and said, Then why don't you just disown me as your daughter? Bessie muttered under her breath. You should be grateful. All right, my dad concluded. The Langston family will publicly announce the severing of ties with me, but it will only be for show. I will still be considered a mad sin, and they won't disown me. I knew this was just a ploy to appease me. Once the 50 million is given to the Blakes, I'll be kicked out immediately. But they didn't know this was exactly what I wanted. The next morning at 9 o'clock, I received a call from Simon Cole. Clara, check your texts. The money should be in your account, he said. I've received it, I confirmed. Today you can go handle the annulment. I'll send a driver to pick you up, he added. Simon, can I ask you a favor? I interrupted. What is it? Can we keep our engagement a secret for now? I didn't want the greedy vultures from the Langston family to latch on to you and cause unnecessary trouble. You don't want anyone to know? Not forever, just for now. Is that okay? All right, I'll arrange for someone else to pick you up, he agreed. Once the 50 million is returned to Ethan Blake, the Langston family will publicly cut ties with me. Whether Simon wants a public or private wedding, I'll fully cooperate. By then, since the Langston family has cut ties with me, they won't be able to harm Simon in any way. After transferring the money to Ethan's account, I took a photo of the remittance receipt as proof. When Ethan called, I saw the Langston family's declaration of severing ties with me in the newspaper's classified section. I stared at those lines seriously, reading them over and over. Then I took more photos and carefully kept the newspaper. Ethan's voice sounded hoarse. Clara, where did you get the money? 50 million is no small sum. If the Langstons couldn't provide it, who gave it to you? Explain yourself. That's none of your business. Now that you've received the money, we have nothing to do with each other. I replied coldly. Before hanging up, Ethan suddenly called my name. Clara, do you think I did this for the 50 million? Regardless of your reasons, it's no longer my concern, I stated. Clara, you should know that if I don't speak up, no guy in downtown would dare to take you, he warned. I chuckled softly over the phone. Is that so? If you don't believe me, you can try, he challenged. I didn't want to waste any more time talking to him, so I hung up the phone. No sooner had the phone hung up than it rang again. Just as I was about to block his number, I saw two words flashing on the screen. Simon Cole. Is the Langston family cutting ties with you? How did you know? I was surprised. He was too well informed. Clara Langston. Yes? If you feel sad, you don't have to endure it. I really didn't want to cry. From childhood to now, I've become so used to it that I'm numb. I'm not sad. But when someone cares about you, you become more fragile. So when I spoke, my voice had a hint of tears. Clara, you can cry in front of me after all. Starting tomorrow, I'll be your husband. Tears welled up in my eyes. But before becoming your husband, I've arranged another identity for you. What identity? I timidly said softly. Simon fell silent for half a minute before speaking. So my current identity is a 60-year-old wealthy merchant, and you're my mistress. Are you angry? Over the phone, he sighed lightly. Clara, see you tomorrow. Do you still want to register our marriage? Rest well today and wear your most beautiful dress tomorrow. Simon must have planned ahead, so the entire process of registering the marriage went swiftly. After getting the documents, Simon took me to the hospital first. He held my hand the whole time, making us look very affectionate. His granddad was seriously ill, but managed to smile at me, looking somewhat relieved. I couldn't help but feel uneasy, deceiving an elderly person who was about to pass like this. He must have loved his outstanding grandson and hoped for a harmonious marriage. Little did he know I couldn't truly be considered Simon's real wife. After leaving the hospital, Simon had an important meeting to attend, so he had the driver take me back to get my luggage. The driver was an old guy used to serving the Cole family. He had watched Simon grow up. Though his hair was white, he was still lively. When the Langston family saw him get out of the car and open the door for me, they all assumed he was my sugar daddy. Because they looked down on my current status as a mistress, no one paid any attention to me. I went upstairs and brought down my suitcase. Only my father said a few words to me. We're cutting ties with you as a temporary measure. Clara, once things calm down, we'll bring you back, I replied. How long do I have to wait? I asked pitifully. It depends on the situation. Then you have to keep your promise. Don't worry. As I left with my suitcase, I could clearly sense the Langston family's relief. The driver took me to Simon's private residence. The house wasn't too big, but the environment was very peaceful. There weren't many maids and servants, making me feel relaxed. Madam, Mr. Cole instructed that you can do whatever you want in the house. He'll be back in the evening. But at 8 o'clock that night, I received a call from Simon. I had to go to the mainland for an important meeting and won't be back for about a week. If you're bored, you can go out with friends to shop or have tea. Don't stay home all day. Then I'll go to my small apartment for a few days. It's close to the city center, so it's convenient. I'll pick you up when I return. On the third day of Simon's business trip, a volunteer I had previously done charity work with called me. She invited me to a small charity auction in the socialite circle. I was very interested in the event's theme, a fundraiser for children with congenital heart disease. When I arrived, I saw many familiar faces. Among them was Lily Carter. However, she didn't look well today, despite still being dressed up. Being forced off the ship that day had taken a bigger toll on her than I thought. Lily also saw me but just smirked and went to talk to the people next to her. Is what you said true? Is she becoming a mistress? Of course it's true. Her parents are ashamed of her and have cut ties with her. Didn't you read the newspaper? Her sugar daddy is almost 80 years old. Even her granddad would be more than enough. Oh my God, how can we invite someone like her to charity events? Yeah, we shouldn't be involved with someone like her. Let's ask her to leave. The scene got chaotic, and the socialite who invited me looked embarrassed. Clara, how about you join next time? I didn't want to make things difficult, so I took the initiative to leave. However, just as I reached the door, I bumped into Ethan Blake. Clara? I ignored him and kept walking outside, but Ethan grabbed my wrist. Are you here to find me? I pulled my hand away. No, I'm not. I just heard about your situation today. Ethan stopped me again. Clara, return the money. Why? I couldn't help but sneer. Didn't you want 50 million? Clara Langston, Ethan's face darkened. I said, as long as you submit to me once. How should I submit? I pushed him away again. Do you want me to kneel before you like a dog and thank you for your charity? Ironically, no one knew that the seemingly classy and noble Ethan Blake, in private, he loved using money and power to trample others. My life might not mean much, but I refuse to be humiliated like that. Clara, now that you have a notorious reputation, think about the consequences of your actions. Ethan changed the subject. Clara Langston, becoming a mistress will ruin your reputation for life. It's my choice. Clara, I'm giving you a way out. Is that so? But I don't need it. I walked past him and continued outside. Ethan's voice was low behind me. Clara, I'm only giving you one chance. Think it over and come find me. I didn't look back, but that night I got a call from my landlord. He ordered me to move out overnight. I didn't argue, just packed my things and went downstairs. But unexpectedly, as soon as I stepped outside, I saw Simon's car. The driver got out and took my suitcase. Madam, Mr. Cole asked me to pick you up and take you back. Is he back? Mr. Cole is flying back tomorrow morning. My eyes suddenly felt sore. Has he finished all his work? It was supposed to be a week, and it's only the 4th day. Mr. Cole is worried about you and doesn't want you to be uncomfortable. I'm fine. His work is important. Don't let me hold him back. I sat in the car, but my mind was in chaos. I couldn't describe the complex feelings I had. It was like being a pitiful worm abandoned by the world, suddenly holding a gold mine that could rival a country's wealth. When I arrived at Simon's residence and returned to my room, my phone rang. Clara, Simon here. I'm sorry about everything. Let's talk tomorrow. I felt extremely ashamed. To escape the Langston family, I had deliberately tarnished my reputation like this. His work was so demanding and exhausting, yet I kept causing trouble. If I had just stayed obediently in his house, none of this would have happened. Simon, I'm sorry. Simon seemed a bit helpless. I'm not blaming you. Let's forget about it. We'll talk properly when I come back tomorrow. After hanging up, I received a friend request on my phone. It was from Simon, so I approved it. There was only one post in his social media, posted 3 days ago, with only one photo. Our marriage certificate? I couldn't see what people in the comments were saying. I could only see his 2 replies to his friends' comments. Yeah, I'm married. Let me introduce you to my wife, Clara Langston. That night, I also posted a message on my social media, just 3 simple words. I'm getting married. Many people left messages asking about it, and some friends called me. When I answered the phone, it was Ethan's voice. So, have you figured it out? I gave you a chance, but I never said I'd marry you. I couldn't help but laugh softly. I didn't say the groom was you. You're remarrying that old man. Clara, you're willingly falling into depravity, willing to give yourself to a married man. I hung up the phone and blocked his number. That night, my mind was filled with so many thoughts, and I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. I finally dozed off when dawn was near. I didn't even realize when Simon came home. When I woke up and saw a figure coming out of the bathroom, I was so scared I almost screamed, my heart about to leap out. It's me, Clara. I'm Simon Cole. Don't be afraid. I pressed down my racing heart, my face still pale. Simon held me in his arms and gently stroked my back. Take slow breaths. Don't be nervous. Relax. You're safe. So I leaned against his chest and took a while to calm down. After calming, I suddenly realized I was only wearing a silk nightgown, and Simon had just finished showering, wearing only a pair of shorts. I'm okay. I blushed and spoke softly, gently stepping out of his embrace. I'm sorry I scared you. Simon tidied up my messy hair. Why did you sleep so long? I had a bit of insomnia last night. I felt uneasy. The nightgown was thin, and I never wear a bra to sleep. Just now, I was held tightly in your arms. with only a thin layer of fabric between us. My face felt like it was burning. I grabbed the blanket, wanting to wrap myself up, but it felt like it would draw even more attention. Not knowing what to do, Simon helped me lie back down. Sleep a bit more. It's almost noon anyway. We might as well have lunch later. He naturally covered me with the thin blanket. I'll go to the study for a bit and come get you later. Watching him leave, I finally felt relieved and sighed. During the day, he was mostly busy in his study, but at 9 o'clock in the evening, after he returned to the master bedroom, he showed no intention of leaving. Actually, I had thought about fulfilling the marital duties after marriage. After all, it was a promise I made to cooperate with all his needs. I watched Simon come out of the bathroom. After hesitating for a while, I finally asked softly, "Are you sleeping here tonight?" "Oh." Simon glanced at me but didn't say anything. In my confused mind, maybe Simon only needed a wife in name. Maybe I was overthinking. I got out of bed with a pillow in my arms, tentatively suggesting, "Then should I sleep in the guest room?" He still didn't say anything. I walked a few steps toward the door with the pillow in my arms, but someone hugged me from behind. "You said you'd fully cooperate with my needs," he said. "Mr. Cole?" My back was pressed against his firm chest. I felt his heart beating hard. His skin felt warm, making me slightly dizzy. Simon lowered his head and gently brushed aside the hair cascading down my neck. "Clara, you're my wife now." I leaned into his embrace and gently closed my eyes. I relaxed completely, letting him lift me up and place me on the soft bed. When he leaned down to kiss me, my fingers tightly gripped his forearm. My heart raced, almost suffocating. The kiss became intermittent and fragmented. "If there's anything uncomfortable, let me know," Simon said, touching my flushed face. After my heartbeat gradually calmed, he continued. Several times, I really felt like I was about to suffocate, but Simon always held back at the right moment. I could feel the tension in his muscles as they trembled slightly. Sweat dripped from his forehead and fell onto my chest, scorching hot. His heart was pounding intensely and his breath was rapid. I was uncomfortable, but he seemed even more uneasy. "Clara," he whispered, leaning down to gently kiss my face. "Do you feel better now?" I shook my head, then nodded, but my eyes were already hazy and my hands unknowingly clung tightly to his neck. It felt like resistance, but it was more like compliance. Lust filled his eyes. For a brief moment, I even had the illusion that Simon liked me. "Clara." He leaned down again, with increasing force. In the end, I seemed to lose consciousness for about 2 seconds, but it wasn't as painful as before, when I had seizures. Instead, I felt like I was floating on a cloud, enveloped in softness, until Simon woke me up. "Clara, is there anywhere uncomfortable?" I shook my head again and gently reached out my hand to hold onto his waist. It seems that women naturally rely on their first man. Simon embraced me and said, "Rest for a while, then we can take a shower." As he spoke, his fingers rested on my chest. "Clara, is your heart uncomfortable?" "It's fine." I thought about the several pauses during the process. I couldn't help but ask him softly, "Simon, are you feeling uncomfortable?" He cupped my face and kissed me, his voice hoarse. "If you keep asking, I really will be uncomfortable. I don't want it anymore." "Feel uncomfortable?" He cupped my face and kissed me, his voice hoarse. "If you keep asking, I really will be uncomfortable. I don't want it anymore. Okay, no more again." But he didn't let go of me. "I just want to kiss you." I remained silent and obediently let him kiss me. In my hazy mind, I couldn't help but think, when he calls me Clara, he seemed genuinely caring. But this serious and self-disciplined guy would probably only call me that in bed. I didn't have a chance to verify my guess, because the next morning, Simon left early again. I knew he was super busy. After all, being in his position meant handling countless matters, big and small. So I stayed home obediently, trying not to cause him any more trouble. Although I didn't go out, the days were unusually peaceful. For the first time in my 21 years, I felt the beauty of a calm and peaceful time. No need to worry about being treated as a commodity by my family. No need to be hurt by my parents' favoritism and relatives. I didn't have to think about anything as long as I did things that made me happy. I even picked up the piano I hadn't played for years, bought an online painting course, and started learning oil painting. I spent about a week without leaving the house. One afternoon, Simon suddenly called me and said there was a gala that evening he wanted me to attend. He had already prepared formal attire and jewelry, and a team of stylists would come to our home later. Will you go tonight? I'll come directly to you after I finish my work. What kind of gala is it? Should I go? It's a charity fundraiser dinner to help children with congenital heart disease. I thought you might want to go. His words touched me. The last charity event I couldn't attend due to Lily's scandal spreading was also for children with congenital heart disease. So Simon still remembered that. Because of my own heart condition, I've always been concerned about this matter. I still remember that even after I got engaged to Ethan, I faithfully volunteered every month. I visited sick or disabled kids in the welfare home. But Ethan once mocked me, "You're quite good at seeking fame and reputation." But he didn't know I wasn't doing it for fame and reputation. It was just because I had faced such hardships myself that I wanted to help more kids like me. Simon, of course I want to attend, but if you come over tonight, our secret won't be kept anymore. I wanted to ask him if it would cause him trouble or have a negative impact. Clara, from the beginning, it was you who wanted to keep it a secret, not me. I held my phone, murmuring in confusion. I don't quite understand why. Why did he agree to marry me? Why did he never think about hiding our marriage? Why, of all people, me? I'll answer you when I get home tonight. When I arrived at the evening gala venue, I naturally attracted countless curious glances. But what puzzled me a little was this. Since Simon was attending the charity gala, it was obviously high-end. The Blake family could attend, but the Langston family definitely couldn't. Yet Bessie Langston was there. As I walked in, the Langston family was surrounding Ethan, engrossed in conversation, and my own biological sister, Bessie Langston, looked at Ethan with a shy and passionate gaze. Clara, how dare you show up here? Bessie spoke in surprise, and Mrs. Langston immediately walked over with a stern face. Clara, don't you know the occasion? You're here to embarrass us. How do you think people will see our Langston family? Oh. I looked at the elegant and dignified lady in front of me, and there was no ripple in my heart. Clara has already cut ties with me, hasn't she? So I have no relationship with the Langston family anymore. Even if I embarrass myself, it won't reflect on the Langston family. But you're still surnamed Langston, and everyone in downtown knows you're my daughter. So what do you suggest I do? Clara, leave downtown and let your sugar daddy take you abroad. But Dad promised me that I could come back once the storm blows over. Mrs. Langston looked at me as if I were a fool. What are you daydreaming about? Your name has already been removed from the Langston family tree. Is that true? Of course it's true. So, legally and by blood, I have no connection to the Langston family anymore? That's right. Good. I turned around and looked around. Everyone must have heard what Mrs. Langston said. Clara, you better leave quickly. Why make a scene and lose face? Bessie pretended to be gentle and generous. Simon is here too. Don't let people laugh at you. At this moment, Simon also spoke up. Clara, didn't you say you were getting married? Mr. Blake, that tycoon has a wife and kids, mistresses all over the world. How could he actually marry her? So, your social media post that day was fake. I was about to say something, but Simon had already stepped forward and grabbed my arm. Clara, let me ask you again. Before he could finish, the gala hall suddenly fell silent. Mr. Cole is here. Why would Mr. Cole attend such a small gala? I don't know, but we're really lucky tonight to see the real Mr. Cole. Why is Mr. Cole coming this way? Oh my God, why is Mr. Cole looking in this direction? Is he looking at Miss Langston? It seemed like they heard the discussions, and Bessie's face quickly turned red. Mrs. Langston couldn't hide her delight either. I turned around and looked at Simon. He was still wearing a black business suit, looking very serious and unapproachable. At this moment, I couldn't help but feel a little dazed. This was the man I had only seen on TV and in newspapers. Now he was my husband. He had kissed me many times and called me Clara. He was really gentle with me, like a very, very good husband. Clara, Simon spoke. This was the first time he called my name in public. Not Clara Langston, but an affectionate and intimate name, Clara. The smile on Bessie's face froze in a somewhat comical way. Mrs. Langston was also stunned. Ethan looked even more bewildered. I forcefully shook off Ethan's hand with a hint of grievance in my slightly reddened eyes. Simon, wait. He walked through the crowd and came straight to me. Your dress looks beautiful today. Your makeup suits you well. Very beautiful. I wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Just as tears were about to fall from my eyes, Simon embraced me in front of everyone. It's all right. I was only a few minutes late and you were bullied. When he mentioned the word bullied, his gaze lightly swept across the crowd. Mrs. Langston's face turned pale, and Bessie instinctively hid behind her. Simon's gaze finally fell on Ethan's face. Mr. Blake, what were you talking about with my wife just now? The word wife in Simon's words was like a bomb. The silent crowd immediately erupted into a low discussion that couldn't be controlled. Ethan still seemed somewhat incredulous and spoke in a daze. Wife? Yes, Clara Langston, she is my wife. Simon Cole's wife. As soon as Simon finished speaking, Mrs. Langston suddenly regained her senses and walked a few steps to my side, affectionately grabbing my arm. Clara, my child, why didn't you tell Mom about such a big, happy event? I pushed her hand away. Mrs. Langston, I am no longer part of the Langston family. Mrs. Langston was taken aback and hurriedly said, There's no lingering hatred between a biological mother and daughter. We can just talk and resolve any misunderstandings between us. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. I have no connection with the Langston family anymore, as the family tree can attest. Mrs. Langston became anxious and looked at Simon pleadingly. Mr. Cole, you see, our child Clara is just being childish and is still mad at me. I'll listen to my wife, Simon said. Simon embraced me, his voice cold. If Clara says she has no relationship with the Langston family, then she has no relationship. Mrs. Langston was devastated. Simon suddenly spoke up. Mrs. Langston, as far as I know, the Langston family hasn't donated a single cent to charity in the past decade. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Langston immediately broke out in a cold sweat, unable to respond. So you haven't donated a single cent. Then why does the Langston family always scramble to attend charity galas, to gain fame and prestige? How shameless. Mrs. Langston couldn't bear to stay any longer and left with Bessie in a sorry state. Simon embraced me. Clara, let's go home too. We haven't made a donation to the children yet. I reminded him in a low voice. Simon, my heart isn't doing well. In the dim room, I felt waves of dizziness. The familiar feeling of suffocation came over me, and I clutched his arm tightly, turning my face to breathe deeply. Simon crouched down, his forehead lightly touching mine. Clara, I can sense you're struggling. But my body was so uncooperative. Simon, how about you marry a healthy wife? Clara! Simon's eyes were unusually serious. There's no shortage of healthy women in this world, but I'm here for you. What's wrong with you like this? He brushed aside the damp hair on my forehead. In my eyes, you're the best. Your health isn't good. We'll take it slow, treat it slowly. If it can't be cured in downtown, we'll go to the capital. And if that doesn't work, we'll go abroad for treatment. But what if it still can't be cured? Simon bent down and gently kissed me. Then I'll practice abstinence and focus only on business. As the new year approached, Simon finally had some free time. He took me to the capital, where the best cardiac surgeons were said to be. I was quite nervous during the examination. We'll do our best and leave the rest to fate, Simon said, habitually tidying my hair. Go on. I'll be waiting here for you. After completing all the detailed professional examinations, the elderly expert with white hair looked at me with a hint of regret. I've reviewed your medical reports. Among congenital heart disease patients, you're in the less severe category. If you had undergone surgery in your childhood, you'd have already recovered. I couldn't believe what the doctor said and shook my head repeatedly. Doctor, are you mistaken? Since I was young, my family always told me my condition is incurable. They took me to many hospitals, and the diagnosis was always the same. Later, I refused to go to the hospital anymore, not wanting to hear myself being sentenced to death over and over again. They told me I could only survive by spending money to take good care of myself, and that I owe them my life for letting me grow up. It was only when Simon hugged me that I realized tears were streaming down my face unconsciously. They lied to me, didn't they? Why did they deceive me? Why did they treat me like this? If they didn't want to cure me, they could have abandoned me or given me away. Why did they lie to me for so many years? Clara, don't dwell on these questions. Your recovery is more important than anything else, you know? I just can't understand, I replied. Simon held me even tighter. Then let's not think about these meaningless things. Let's look forward and not look back. When spring arrived, Simon came to pick me up and take me back to downtown. By then, I had already been discharged from the hospital, and my health had improved significantly. A few days ago, he received a notice that his granddad was critically ill, so he hurried back to the hospital in downtown overnight. It wasn't until the day before yesterday, when his granddad miraculously survived the critical condition and stabilized, that he finally felt relieved. It had been exactly half a month since we last saw each other. Simon got out of the car, but didn't come toward me. We had made a promise before. When we met again, I would run to his side, just like any healthy girl would. He opened his arms. I lifted my dress and ran down the steps, passing through the garden filled with lush green and bright yellow, running lightly in the spring breeze. For the first time in 21 years, I ran like this. Even the slightly chilly spring breeze felt warm. I disregarded everything and threw myself into his embrace. I tilted my face up to kiss him, but today I was wearing flat shoes and he was much taller. I could only stand on tiptoe, but he lowered his head and caught my kiss. It had been almost a year since I married Simon, but that night it was the first time I saw him indulging himself. He kissed the scar on my chest, the mark left by the surgery still clear and somewhat ugly. I didn't want him to see it and raised my hand to cover it, but Simon wouldn't allow it. Will I look ugly to you just as beautiful as that night? So you've desired me from the beginning. No, even earlier than you think. When was that? Have you seen me before? Clara, are you sure you want to reminisce with your husband at this time? Simon held my hands and leaned down again. Simon, I feel dizzy. I can't breathe. I resorted to my usual trick. Naturally, he didn't believe me, but he still stopped at the most intense moment. My heart was beating fast, but it no longer tore me apart like before. Inside my chest, there was only a surging tide of uncontrollable emotions. I took the initiative to embrace him and lightly bit his chin. Simon, you no longer need to worry about my body. In the future, you can do whatever you want. I've seen Simon being serious and focused when giving presentations at downtown conferences. I've also seen him conducting multinational meetings in the office, fluent in English and French. In private at home, he also had a relaxed and easygoing side. Even the household staff dared to exchange a few jokes with him. But as soon as he suppressed his smile, everyone around him fell silent. And at this moment, there was a clear desire and a strong possessiveness in his eyes. He allowed himself to sink into desire and fall into the passionate world with me. In the endless pleasure, he seemed more unrestrained and devoted than me. In the past, I didn't understand why someone so close to me would treat me like this. But later, I understood. The hardships and grievances I had endured for the past 21 years were just to let me meet Simon again. Simon, are you? This was the first time I asked, but before I could finish, Simon seemed to know what I was going to ask. His kiss landed on my ear, his warm and wet fingers entwined tightly with mine. I heard his voice, slightly hoarse and seductive. Clara, I love you. When Clara Langston was 16 years old, she often volunteered on weekends and holidays. During puberty, many girls go through a slightly awkward period due to their physical development, but Clara had already grown into a beautiful and charming young woman. Due to her illness, she had always been a loner. As a result, she naturally didn't fit in with others. The first time I saw her was when I accompanied my granddad to church for prayer. She was volunteering and leading the orphanage children in the choir. While the kids sang, she played the piano in a white dress. When it was time for a group photo after the performance, she, who should have stood in the middle, was squeezed into a corner. She didn't fight for attention and quietly stood in the last row, in an inconspicuous position, and took the photo. No one would have paid attention to such a small incident, but my granddad suddenly said something to me at the moment. Look at that girl playing the piano. Despite her young age, she can remain calm and composed. As a result, I took a few more glances at her. At that time, I was 24 years old and full of ambition, ready to make a career for myself. I was completely focused on my goals. At that time, I only had a faint impression of her. She looked beautiful in a dress. The second time I saw her was at her engagement ceremony with Marcus Arden. Because my granddad had some connections with the Arden family, we had been invited multiple times, so I naturally had to show my face. I went to the engagement ceremony that day. Many people were discussing the leading lady of the event, but their words had a double meaning. First, Miss Langston was indeed beautiful, but unfortunately, she wasn't in good health. Second, although the Arden family didn't lack the $1 million dowry, the Langston family, as a fallen household, seemed to have suffered a loss even if Miss Langston was beautiful. I became interested and looked up at the stage. Clara Langston was still wearing a beautiful white dress, but she seemed lifeless, like a meticulously dressed doll. There was no trace of liveliness or agility in her eyes. I somehow thought of that hot summer day. The children in the choir sang with innocent voices, as if they were celestial beings. The girl sitting at the piano was gentle and quiet. Even standing in the corner of the last row, she smiled peacefully. Her eyes were very dark and bright, with a hint of sparkle. She couldn't be compared to the stiff puppet being manipulated on the stage at that moment. When Marcus Arden kissed her, for some reason, he suddenly turned away. The workload became increasingly heavy, and I rarely thought about the person with whom I had a fleeting encounter. Occasionally, when I had free time, I would gather with my family for a meal. Among my cousins and sisters, the name Clara Langston would occasionally come up. Speaking of her, she really is pitiful. First, she was sold off by her family, and this Arden family's young master doesn't even like her. Yes, I heard they've been engaged for 2 years, but Mr. Arden has never set foot in the Langston family's home. I think this marriage is probably not going to happen. Why did Mr. Arden agree to the engagement in the first place? If it was for her beauty, then why did he neglect her after the engagement? I stood behind a lush short tree, momentarily holding my breath. I heard from a Miss Arden, from a branch of the family, that Mr. Arden did have some interest in her at first, so the Langston family made a bold request, and he agreed. But that Miss Langston, her private life is quite scandalous. No way. I've seen Clara several times. We often volunteer together, and she really seems like a good girl. It shouldn't be false. Just how scandalous did she become? It seems that when she was 16 or 17, she had relationships with many boys. Before she got engaged to Mr. Arden, she even had secret meetings with other men at hotels. The Langston family spent a lot of money to barely cover it up until after the engagement ceremony. Think about it. Would someone as proud and arrogant as Mr. Arden be able to swallow this? So, after the engagement ceremony, Clara was sent back to the Langston family. Mr. Arden, due to his reputation, could only conceal the ugly incident, but from then on, he deeply despised Clara. Why didn't he just break off the engagement? Maybe he truly liked her in his heart, so he was unwilling to give up. But he was also disgusted by what Clara did. He was conflicted. I still don't believe that Clara would do such things. When you mention the secret meetings at hotels, do you have any photos? I think I saw some. Let me go find them. Why did you come over, Simon? I suddenly pushed aside the bushes and walked out. The girls were all startled and quickly stood up, politely greeting him. At that moment, his expression was probably not very pleasant. The once lively garden instantly became eerily silent. Have you all finished your homework? Are you here gossiping and bad-mouthing others? The Cole family had strict family rules, especially when it came to the girls. They were particularly strict in their upbringing. It was acceptable for the young girls to gossip privately, but what they were saying today had indeed gone too far. If the elders found out, they would probably resort to family discipline. Everyone was so scared they were on the verge of tears. He scolded them harshly until each of them promised tearfully never to badmouth others again. Then he turned and left. For the next few days, his mood was consistently not very good. On that weekend, when he had rare free time, he accompanied his granddad to church, and there he unexpectedly encountered her. She was still wearing a simple dress, accompanying the children and playing the piano, but she seemed even thinner, and her eyes always carried a layer of misty melancholy. She played a wrong note, panicked, and turned pale, and the piano abruptly fell silent. Someone came over and reprimanded her mercilessly. She sat there with her head lowered, on the verge of tears, but for the rest of her performance, There wasn't a single mistake. I couldn't help but keep looking at her. In my heart, I even thought that if a tear fell from her eyes, I would definitely stand up and go over to her. But she ultimately didn't cry. However, when I was about to leave, I couldn't help but turn back and quietly find the pastor, asking him to relay a message to her. "You look really beautiful playing the piano in a dress. I hope you can be a little happier." Afterwards, that night at the Grand Gala in downtown, my impulsive decision led to a lifelong union. The moment I unbuttoned her dress, in fact, I had already made up my mind. No matter what, at any cost, I would take her away from Ethan Blake and then marry her. But I didn't expect that she would take the initiative and say to me that she wanted to be my wife. I endured my increasingly intense heartbeat. Using the calmest tone, I presented my condition to her. Within 3 days, I wanted to register our marriage. The moment she agreed, I felt as happy as I did in my youth. The moment I helped her fix her hair, she didn't know just how much self-restraint I used to control myself. I didn't impulsively kiss her. Instead, I had her put on the most beautiful dress and went with her to register our marriage. Little by little, I began to remember the most beautiful Clara Langston from my memories. Fortunately, I finally got what I wanted.